Hello everyone. Welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So, before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. One of Britain's most popular television presenters, the BBC's Jill Dando. Jill Dando. Jill Dando, who is Crime Watch presenter helped to send dozens of criminals to jail, was murdered on her own doorstep today. They've said it's too early to talk about what the motive for the murder might have been. 37-year-old presenter died in hospital after being found shot through the head on her own doorstep. The program was her passion. Now, as Jill helped others, we hope we can do the same for her. Jill Wendy Dando was born on November 9, 1961 in Somerset, England. She was inquisitive, intelligent, and always hard-working. Knowing exactly what she wanted to do with her career, she studied journalism. Before going on to work as a trainee reporter for a local newspaper called the Western Mercury alongside her father and brother. After several years working in different areas and across many fields, she began working for the BBC and quickly moved up the ranks. In early 1988, Jill started presenting the national news in London. She also began presenting television programs such as Breakfast News, The 6 O'Clock News, Holiday, and the unsolved crime appeal show Crime Watch. By this point, she was one of the most recognizable faces in the UK, and she was in the home of most families every day. In 1997, she won the BBC's Personality of the Year award and was frequently referred to as the Golden Girl of television. In the same year, she met Alan Farthing, who would later become her fiancé. The wedding was set for September 1999. However, in April of that year, everything would change and the nation would be left reeling and in complete and utter shock. On the morning of April 26, 1999, 37-year-old Jill Dando left Alan's home in Chiswick. She walked around town for a while visiting a few shops before leaving the shopping center alone just after 11 a.m. She then drove back to her house on Gowan Avenue in Fulham. She didn't regularly spend time at this house as she was in the process of selling it and getting ready for her wedding to Alan. Just as Jill Dando reached the steps at 11:32 a.m., she went to put her keys in the front door and was ambushed from behind. She was pushed onto the ground and her face was pressed into the tiles of her front step. A single shot was fired into her left temple. She had no defensive injuries and it appeared she did not see her attacker coming. She was discovered about 14 minutes later by her neighbor, Helen Dole. The front gate was firmly shut and Helen knew she couldn't go past in case she contaminated the crime scene. She phoned 999 while another neighbor that had been alerted by Helen ran to a nearby doctor's surgery for help. Helen told the officers on the phone that she believed Jill was already dead. She initially thought she had been stabbed because of the amount of blood at the scene. Jill Dando reached Charing Cross Hospital at 12:30 a.m. where doctors and nurses fought tirelessly in an attempt to save her life. But tragically, she was declared dead at 10:03 p.m. Jill Dando arrived here by ambulance at 12:30 p.m. Despite all efforts by hospital paramedics, my Apologies, ambulance paramedics and hospital medical staff, she was certified dead at 10:03 p.m. From ITN. The ITV Nightly News with Dermot Monaghan. Good evening. The TV personality Jill Dando, who is Crime Watch presenter helped to send dozens of criminals to jail, was murdered on her own doorstep today. She was killed by a single gunshot to her head. Tonight, the mystery over her death deepened with speculation that the may have been revenge for her anti-crime work. She was attacked at her home in Fulham in West London. A man was seen hurrying away. Jill had been killed with a bullet from a 9mm caliber semi-automatic pistol. Further analysis showed that the gun had been pressed directly against her head. Her next-door neighbor Richard said he heard Jill cry out but didn't hear a gunshot. Shortly before midday, some of her neighbors were alerted that something was wrong. Two women went towards her front door and saw someone lying on the doorstep. A third neighbor joined them. He felt that the cry sounded more like a cry of surprise, as if she was greeting a friend or someone was playing a joke rather than a cry of fear or something being wrong. When her neighbor Richard looked out of his window, he saw, unbeknownst to him, the killer, a white male with dark hair, standing at around 6 tall, aged approximately 40 years old. He was quickly walking away from Jill Dando's house. Several other witnesses said they saw a smartly dressed man talking on a mobile phone, hanging around outside of Jill's house for at least an hour before she returned home. Other people claimed to see a man fitting the same description running near a bus stop and walking across a road near Jill's house. This person, however, did not fit the description of the man seen walking away from the crime scene just seconds after she was shot. It remains unknown whether these people are linked, whether the witnesses that saw the man in the suit had seen the same person, and if the smartly dressed man or men bore any relevance to the case. Detective Chief Inspector Hamish Campbell was heading the investigation. And Jill Dando's death prompted the largest murder inquiry undertaken by the Metropolitan Police Force. The case was also the biggest criminal investigation since the Yorkshire Ripper, and it completely dominated the media. With no CCTV footage of her street, no DNA left by the killer, and the murder weapon being missing, the case would prove difficult from the beginning. The only piece of evidence left at the scene was the bullet that killed Jill Dando. Several theories were presented early on, some of which remain to this day and some which were ultimately ruled out. Her handbag was still laying by her body, with her mobile phone ringing inside. She was still clutching her house keys and her jewelry and shopping were still there. The chances of it being a robbery did not seem likely. Some speculated that she had been shot and killed by an obsessed fan. Jill Dando was one of the most well-known public figures in the UK, and likely had numerous fans that were fixated with her. The police have said it's too early to talk about what the motive for the murder might have been, but as we have heard, one possibility is that Miss Dando may have been the victim of a stalker. It's likely to be one line of inquiry. Nigel, Jill's brother, said that in the days leading up to her death, she had complained about a man who was, in her words, pestering her. The CCTV of her last known movements out shopping were carefully looked at, and there appeared to be no evidence of her being followed or watched by anyone, either on foot or by car. Another theory came off the back of her work with the TV show Crime Watch. Jill was one of the faces of the famous show that created reconstructions of unsolved crimes. Had She potentially solved a crime that had put someone in prison and ended up being killed as a result of it? Some argued it was possible that her killer was a hitman, potentially hired by someone who had been convicted as a result of crime. Watch. This is a somber and for me a surreal crime watch UK. For all of us here, it can be grueling coping with crimes against victims who are strangers. It's been almost unbearable dealing with Jill's death. Jill Dando was much more than a colleague. She was everyone's friend. Crime Watch is poorer without her, but this program was her passion. And now, as Jill helps others, we hope we can do the same for her. 4. The crew behind the show, it was a painful time appealing for information about one of their own. But just as the show had done for many others, they created a reconstruction that showed Jill's last movements. They also recreated the sightings of the mystery man or men near her house on the day she had been killed, complete with an effort. Next is a window cleaner, and he was opposite Jill's house. And he saw a man again wandering around outside number 29. The window cleaner thought he was an estate agent. He was carrying a mobile phone and was talking into the mobile phone. He described him as having blonde hair but smart in appearance, wearing a suit. Almost all the witnesses talk of a man in a suit with dark hair or black hair. So this man, the window cleaner, sees someone with blonde hair. Now he may be someone completely innocent, or is he the person that we're looking for? It's pretty clear from that reconstruction that the guy walking and running down Fulham Palace Road was one person, and all of the witness statements seem to converge on that one description. And yet that description is different from the gunman. So the effort that you've issued, the man at the bus stop in Fulham Palace Road, may very well not be the killer. The effort is of the man at the bus stop. People need to focus on that. For who is that man? Is he the lookout? Was he another party to the killing? Well, there are two guns here this evening. And what we're saying is, this gun here, the 9mm Browning, the larger firearm, is not the weapon that was involved in the killing of Gerardino, right? That's one that lots of newspapers and so forth have been portraying. It's not that. Yes, it is this type of firearm. This is a 9mm short. Not only is the bullet shorter, but the whole weapon is smaller. It can be held in the palm of your hand, can be concealed in a pocket. People need to look now at this weapon. Have they recently handled this gun? Have they recently passed it on to somebody else? Have they disposed of it for somebody? Did they make arrangements before Monday, the 26th of April, to give this type of gun to somebody? The theory of this being a professional hit as opposed to a random opportunist was further fueled by analysis of the position of the gun. It is thought that nobody heard the gunshots because the gun was so close to her head, and the position would have acted as a suppressor, muffling the sound. The speed that it all happened, alongside the lack of evidence left at the scene and the angle that she was shot from, made many think it was a professional job. In the 6 months following on from Jill Dando's death, the police spoke to over 2,500 people. They tracked 1,200 cars and took over 1,000 statements. But despite their best efforts, little turned up. They seemed no closer to working out who had assassinated Jill Dando. The police were under immense pressure to solve the case. It wasn't just the family and friends of Jill that wanted answers. The public and the media wanted answers, too. Jill Dando's funeral was held in May of 1999. Hundreds of people filled the streets to say goodbye and pay their respects to one of Britain's best-loved television presenters. It was clear from the outpouring of grief just how loved she was. She was buried next to her mother, Wilfred, who passed away in 1986. A year after Jill Dando was killed, police finally believed that they had a suspect. Barry George was a local man who lived around half a mile away from Jill's house. He had learning difficulties and an IQ of 75. When psychologists examined him, they concluded he had several different personality disorders: antisocial, histrionic, and narcissistic. Further assessment showed that he also had brain damage. The day after Jill was shot, he had been spotted acting suspiciously. He also had his own history with the law. He had been arrested several times for crimes such as posing as a policeman, and he had also been found on the grounds of Kensington Palace wearing a balaclava. He also had a string of assault charges against his name. So the police quickly mobilized and put him under surveillance. On the 25th of May 2000, Barry George was arrested for the murder of Jill Dando, and he was charged with the crime several days later. His trial was held at the Old Bailey, and the prosecution's main piece of evidence was a microscopic particle of gunshot residue that had been found inside the pocket of one of Barry's coats. The gunshot residue matched the particles that were found at the scene. The coat also seemed to match the description of the smart clothing that had been seen on a potential suspect or suspects. On the 1st of July 2000, Barry George was convicted by a majority of 10-1 and was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Jill Dando. However, various professionals claimed he wasn't capable of committing a crime like that in such a seemingly experienced way due to his learning difficulties. They also said that the evidence that the prosecution had put forward didn't stack up and came from inconsistent stories and statements. They argued Barry George had no motive and that the time frame of the events simply didn't link him to the case. An expert in gunshot residue said that the single particle could have come from a variety of sources and transferred from any number of places. Ultimately, his coat could have been contaminated, and determining where exactly the single particle came from was impossible. His lawyers immediately set out seeking an appeal, believing it to be a grave miscarriage of justice. In 2001, Jill's co-presenter of Crime Watch, Nick Ross, and Jill's fiancé, Alan Farthing, began raising money to build an academic institute in her name. After successfully raising almost £1.5 million, University College London created the Jill Dando Institute of Security and Crime Science. It became the first university institute in the world to be devoted specifically to crime science. In the same year, the team from the BBC television show Ground Force designed a memorial garden in Jill's memory. It was full of her favorite colors and plants that were special to her. In 2007, Western College opened a new university campus at the site of the former Sixth Form Center where Jill had studied. The Sixth Form building was named the Jill Dando Center. Barry George's defense team had been continuing to file appeals during these years, and in 2007, after 2 unsuccessful attempts, the case was finally reviewed by the Court of Appeal. Sensationally, they overturned the guilty ruling made previously and set a new trial for June 2008. Except this time, the gunshot residue evidence was ruled inadmissible and was not allowed to be used due to expert opinions that had been previously presented. In August of 2008, Barry George was unanimously acquitted of the murder of Jill Dando. After more than 8 years in prison, Barry George is a free man cleared of the murder of TV presenter Jill Dando. He left from the back of the court trying to escape the cameras. Mr. George's family have campaigned tirelessly for his release. We're really delighted to finally have justice. I want to thank everybody who has supported us through all these years. Several newspapers settled with him after he sought damages for articles that had been written about him. He didn't receive any compensation for his time in prison, as it was determined his innocence still hadn't been entirely proven. He now lives in Ireland, but the 8 years he spent inside and the unsolved case of Jill Dando still follows him. To this day, he remains the only person to be put on trial for her murder, and no new arrests have been made since. During Barry George's first trial, the defense put forward another theory as to what could have happened to Jill Dando. Just 3 days before she was shot, British and US warplanes bombed the Radio Television Serbia building in Belgrade. The bombing killed 16 employees, and people wondered if Jill had been killed in retaliation. Just 3 weeks prior to her death, Jill had headed an appeal for the Kosovo Albanian refugees who were fleeing ethnic cleansing in the Balkans. Some people felt that her appeal for aid may have attracted the unwanted attention of Bosnian Serb hardliners, and she had been assassinated as a result. An opposition journalist had been murdered outside of his house in Belgrade before Jill had been killed. The method used in both cases was identical. Just 1 day after the murder of Jill Dando, Tony Hall, who was the BBC's head of news at the time, received a death threat from a man saying he was a Serbian activist. He claimed that he had killed Jill Dando and that Tony Hall would be next. However, the police strongly suspected that this call was nothing more than a hoax. It was determined that the British police never asked the Serbian police for their help, and no police officer ever traveled to Serbia to look into these claims. Ultimately, the police didn't think it was a credible theory. In 2013, Jill's father, Jack Dando, sadly passed away without ever finding out who was responsible for his daughter's death. The case has remained relatively quiet since Barry George's release. But in 2014, a new theory was presented. One of Jill Dando's former colleagues came forward and said that in the months leading up to her death, Jill had been working on exposing a pedophile ring involving some big and well-known names within the BBC. It is alleged that Jill gave a file over to the senior management in the mid-1990s, but the file was handed back to her and an investigation was never carried out. A spokesperson for the BBC said there was nothing that substantiated these claims. And if there was, the allegations would have been looked into. Decades on, Jill's brother, Nigel, continues the search for answers, but knows that he and the police are up against a lot. He does, however, believe that some of the well-known theories can be ruled out. Nigel said he tends to think that it was not a professional hit that was taken out on Jill, nor does he think there is a Serbian connection. He believes that it was, in his words, simply a misguided individual that knew where Jill lived and was on her street at that time with a firearm. He also said he believes whoever this person was simply struck lucky. Sadly, he feels it is unlikely there will be any answers because of the passage of time. Although some detectives believe that the assassination of Jill Dando will likely never be solved. Her family and friends have never given up hope that her killer will eventually be brought to justice. Story 2. 15-year-old Kaylee Hayward lived with her family in a village called Measham in Leicester, England. Kay was part of a big family and was close to all her brothers and sisters. Her mother Stephanie said that she was like a second mom to her younger siblings. She was bubbly and popular amongst her group of friends. Outgoing, friendly, and positive. Kayle's head teacher said she had a real determination to be successful in life. As is typical of most teenagers, Kaylee spent a lot of time on her phone and social media. She was always active on Facebook and loved sharing pictures and statuses with friends and family. Friends she knew from school and new people she was meeting and engaging with online. Friday 13th, 2015. Just after 3 p.m., Kay sent a message to her friend Katie, saying she wouldn't be able to see her later as she said she would be staying at her aunt's house. That evening, Kay asked her father, Martin, for a lift to Ipstock, around a 10-minute drive away from her home in Measham. She told him she was going to meet her friend and would be staying over that weekend. Martin dropped Kay off outside Ipstock Community College at around 6 p.m. that evening. All seemed well, and the following morning, Kay was in contact with her parents, asking if she could stay at her friend's house for another night. After that, they heard nothing. For someone that was glued to her mobile phone, this unnerved her parents. They reassured themselves that she was just busy with her friend and remained as calm as they could. But on Sunday 15th, what turned out to be Kayle's smashed and broken iPhone was found on a street by a member of the public. Upon finding the phone, the man called the last number in Kayle's call history. This number belonged to one of Kay's friends. As soon as the phone call ended, Kayle's friend phoned Stephanie, Kayle's mother, and told her what had happened. Stephanie was shocked as the friend that had phoned her was the same friend Kay had said she'd been staying with. But this friend hadn't actually heard from her in days. There was nothing on Kayle's social media, and nobody had spoken to or seen her. Her family knew they had to get the police involved, and she was reported missing later that Sunday. Detective Chief Superintendent David Sandall of Learshire Police was leading the investigation, and the case started to move very quickly. I'm appealing for your help in trying to locate Kay Hayward, a 15-year-old girl who's currently missing. This is a message for Kay herself. Please contact your family or the police. We just want to check that you are safe and well. If anybody else has seen Kay since Friday the 13th of November, then we're asking you to contact the police. Schoolgirl Kay Hayward. Her disappearance is described as totally out of character. The 15-year-old left home in Measham on Friday evening. She was dropped off a few miles away at Ipstock Community College, where she'd been a former pupil. Kay spoke to her parents on the phone on Saturday morning, but there's been no contact from her since. Over 400 police officers were working on the searches and interviews. Kayle's laptop was seized and her smashed but still working phone was taken in for an inspection, too. Police began to check through all her messages and social media interactions and posts. They asked about Kayle's state of mind when she left the family home on Friday, but by all accounts, she seemed to be her usual and happy self. Nothing seemed to miss. Stephanie said she knew something bad had happened to her daughter. And despite Kayle's father, Martin, and the police doing their best to reassure her, Stephanie's gut was telling her that something was deeply wrong. Tragically, just 2 days later, this missing persons case would escalate. As inquiries have been completed, we've become increasingly concerned that she may have come to harm. And today, we have told the family that we are treating her disappearance as a murder inquiry. Kay told multiple stories about who she was going to visit that weekend. But one of her friends gave some compelling new evidence. Kay had confided in this friend and told her that she had started talking to someone on Facebook. She said she was going to visit him on Friday the 13th and asked if her friend would go with her. However, shortly after the plan was set in motion, Kay canceled and said she was no longer going. Monday, 16th, 2 days since anyone had heard from Kay. To the public and media's shock, the police announced that 2 people had been arrested on suspicion of kidnap after a property in Ipstock had been searched. Over the next couple of days, searches were carried out across the whole of Ipstock and surrounding areas. Items of clothing confirmed to be Kay's were found scattered over a 10 miles radius. Less than 24 hours after the 2 suspects had been arrested on suspicion of kidnap, they were re-arrested, this time on suspicion of the murder of Kay Hayward. On the 18th of November at around 10 p.m. the police made a tragic discovery. Police searching for missing teenager Kay Hayward have found a body in a field in Leicester in the UK. The discovery was made at around 10 p.m. last night. Although formal identification is yet to take place. What happens now? While police will move forward with their investigation. As you say, they have 2 men in their 20s in custody. They've now been arrested on suspicion of murder. And a key line of inquiry will be Kay's Facebook page with friends and family, both saying that she was speaking to a man online in the run-up to her disappearance. It was confirmed that it was Kay Hayward's body. She had been beaten to death. Her jaw and nose were both broken, and her body was covered in injuries and self-defense wounds. There were 42 breaks to her body, 16 breaks to her face, and 6 lacerations to the back of her head. The post-mortem examination also determined that she had been subjected to a horrifying sexual assault. The suspects still in custody on suspicion of her murder were Luke Harlow and Stephen Beeman. I am Detective Chief Superintendent David Sandel, Head of Crime for Leicester Police. A 28-year-old man tonight has been charged with the murder of Kay Hayward. Stephen Beedman of George Avenue and Ipstock has been charged with murder and a sexual offense. Luke Harlow, 27, of George Avenue Ipstock, has been charged with sexual offenses. But how and why had this come to happen and unravel so quickly? In the months leading up to Kay's murder, Luke Harlow had attempted to contact a string of underage girls, the youngest being just 13 years old. In some of the messages, he spoke of wanting to kidnap the girls and keep them as slaves. He said on October 31, 2015, less than a month before Kay's body was found, Kay had received a friend request on Facebook from Luke Harlow, which she accepted. As soon as she did, she got a message from him. Kay replied. Within about 10 minutes, they had exchanged phone numbers and went on to send over 2,600 messages back and forth over the course of 2 weeks. Kay and Luke both initially lied about their ages. Kay made herself 19 and Luke told her he was a year younger. However, Kay quickly admitted that she was only 15 years old, but this didn't deter Luke Harlow and he continued to shower her with attention and compliments over the next 2 weeks. He said they needed to keep their relationship a secret, and the messages got more graphic and explicit as the days went on. Luke asked Kay if she would meet him at his house, and they could watch movies and have food together. Luke quickly added more to this plan, and he asked Kay if she wanted to get drunk with him, as he would be buying vodka for both of them. They made a plan to meet on Friday the 13th of November, 2nd week since they had started talking. Luke told Kay to lie to her family and friends about where she was going and who she was meeting so that their relationship could remain a secret. It is unknown exactly what happened on that Friday night, but Kayle's friend said she had woken to a message sent from Kayle's iPhone just after 9 p.m. on Friday night. The message simply said, "Help." Her friend texted her back and asked her what she'd meant. She said she got a message straight back saying, "I meant hello." Her friend described the messages as unusual and said they didn't sound like her. Sometime on Sunday morning, Kay asked her parents if she could stay over at her friend's house for one more night, and they agreed, believing she was safe and with someone they knew. At some point during the Saturday evening, Luke ran out of alcohol and went to his neighbors to get some more. Stephen Beedman, a landscape gardener, lived just a stone's throw away from Luke, but he had no alcohol either. Both men went to the shops for more drinks, and then both returned to Luke's house. There was no mention of Stephen's name in any of the chat logs or messages between Luke and Kay, so it is fairly certain she had no knowledge that Stephen even existed. The events that transpired in the following hours are nothing short of horrific. In the late evening of Saturday night, neighbors heard banging and crashing sounds coming from inside the house. Kay, having been pied with alcohol, was sexually assaulted by Harlow. She fled the house without her shoes, naked from the waist down, being chased down by Beedman, a witness whose house overlooked the pathway near Harlow's home, looked outside his window that night and saw what he initially thought was a police officer attempting to restrain a young girl by pinning her to the ground. He then assumed it was a young couple having some sort of domestic argument as he saw the pair get up and walk away holding hands. He said he didn't see or hear anything from them again. Stephen Beedman marched Kay to a car park where he subjected her to a horrifying sexual assault. He then proceeded to walk with Kay to a park area. Kay managed to break away and start running, but Beedman caught up with her and Kay hit Beedman in the face with a brick. Beedman then picked up some brick and beat her to death with it. The wounds on Beedman's face showed just how hard Kay had fought until the end. As soon as she was reported missing, just a day later, police quickly discovered the messages between Luke and Kay. Luke Carlo's property was then searched. Police saw that the house was in chaos and some of Kay's belongings were still there. Luke Harlow was immediately brought in for questioning and placed under arrest for kidnap. He admitted that Kay had been at his house and said that he knew it was wrong because of her age. What else? One of us folks, what's the other stuff? Did you become friends on Facebook? How did that come about? I can't remember if I added her or she added me. I'm not 100 sure, but like I've got loads of people on it and I have a habit of accepting anyone who tries, I mean, regardless of whether the name rings a bell or anything, I've got like 2,000 odd people, but I'm not sure whether she added me or I did her. But basically, as soon as we were friends on here, we just started talking just like No, like, oh, hey, how are you? And then like, where are you from? How long ago was that? Not long ago. Only about I'd say roughly a month, right? But he said he had woken up the next morning to find her missing and assumed that she had gone home during the night. He told police that he and his neighbor Stephen Beedman had gone to go and buy more alcohol and returned to the house together. Harlow then claimed that he went to bed drunk, leaving Kay and Beedman alone. With this, the hunt was on to find Stephen Beedman. He was found at a family member's house and was swiftly brought in for questioning and arrested on suspicion of kidnap. We want to give you an opportunity, if you know her and if you indeed know where she is, to tell us right now at the beginning of the day. No, I don't. You don't know where she is? I don't know where she is. I met her Saturday night at 8, about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then about 4 hours. Police were immediately taken aback by the scratches covering Beedman. His face was a picture that instantly spoke 1,000 words. Beedman also denied knowing where Kay was and said he had left Luke Harlow and her together on the sofa in Harlow's house. Both men said they had been drinking excessively and a lot of the night was either hazy or a total blackout. However, between the messages, the witness statements, and the marks on Beedman's face, it was clear for all to see that both Harlow and Beedman were the people responsible for what had happened to Kay Hayward. Police also later found images of child abuse on Beedman's computers. A series of interviews later, Stephen Beedman admitted that he and Kay had left the house together that night. I was pretty much walking because I must have scared her. I must have. So, is she resisting you at this point, or is she just walking? No, not when she's walking. Okay. Are you having to control her by hold her, or is she walking independently? By this point, she's walking independently. But up until that point, no. And how are you managing to control her? Just pulling up and pulling around by your hand. Yeah. All right. Okay. Are you using anything else? Is it just your presence? Is there any weapons? No weapons. You're not doing anything, so what's happening? I honestly can't remember. I've been drinking. We'd all been drinking. See. The issue is she's run out, possibly with her phone without her trousers, and there's a complete, as you've described, disarray in the flat. The speakers are over, so there's obviously been a struggle. Well, that's the implication. But we're asking you if you can explain what's happened. I honestly cannot explain that. He asked investigators if he could talk with his appropriate adult. He then finally told the police where Kay was. When officers finally found Kay's body, it was so damaged that the police could not allow Stephanie and Martin to see their daughter in that state. Instead, they arranged for the pair to hold Kay's hand, but nothing more. Kay's body was identified using dental records. On the 20th of November 2015, shortly after being arrested, Leicester police announced that had been charged with rape and murder, and Luke Harlow had been charged with grooming and 2 counts of sexual activity with a child. In January of 2016, Kay's funeral was held. Bows were tied around trees in Kay's favorite color, purple. Hundreds of mourners packed out the streets of Measham as her coffin was carried on a white horse-drawn carriage. Outpourings of grief, sadness, and anger for what had happened was apparent in the whole community. Luke Carlo and Stephen Beedman eventually plead guilty to the crimes, but the prosecution weren't satisfied with these imprisonment forward for both men. Both of them pled not guilty to this charge, and so with the blessing of Cale's family, prosecutor Miranda Morrissey took it to trial. In June 2016, the trial of Stephen Beedman and Luke Harlow began in Nottingham Crown Court with Judge Mrs. Justice Cox presiding. Prosecutor Miranda Moore argued that the way in which Luke Carlo's house was found by the police showed obvious signs of a struggle, and that Kay had been held there against her will. Things were smashed and broken, items were knocked over, and the house was in disarray. She also said that Luke Harlow's claims of being asleep and having no idea what had happened to Kay didn't add up either. Luke's glasses had been smashed, presumably due to Kay fighting him off. The state that the house was in was further backed up by neighbors who said they had heard banging and crashing sounds, and this likely would have woken Harlow if he was asleep. Stephen Beedman simply said that Kay was free to leave the house at any time she wanted. After a painful 2-week trial for the family and friends of Kay Haywood, the jury had reached their verdict. Both Luke Harlow and Stephen Beedman were found guilty of false imprisonment alongside their previous guilty plea. Luke Carlo was sentenced to 12 years for meeting a child following sexual grooming, 2 counts of sexual activity with a child, attempting to meet 2 other 15-year-old girls following sexual grooming, and false imprisonment. Stephen Beedman was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 35 years for the false imprisonment, rape, and murder of Kay Haywood. Justice Cox said of the case, "The pain, terror, and anguish that would have been suffered by this young girl is truly horrifying to contemplate. I am entirely satisfied on the evidence that she would have been acutely distressed and frightened. It seems to me this is every parent's worst nightmare. It is absolutely clear to me. Absolutely no blame can be attached to them for what happened." In April 2021, it was announced that Stephen Beedman had died in prison. In a statement, a spokesperson said, following the tragic events that unfolded on November 13, Cale's family set up Kay's Cause, which would campaign to increase the minimum age for use of social media websites to 16. The family wants site operators to request some sort of legal document like a passport or driver's license to prove a child's age, even if they have permission of their parents to open the account. Alongside this, a short film entitled Cale's Love Story was created by Learshire Police and Afixius Films. It aims to highlight the dangers of speaking to strangers online and raises awareness for the Cease campaign. Commitment to eradicate abuse and sexual exploitation. With the permission of Cale's family, the film reenacted some of the events that transpired during the last 14 days of Kay's life. It went on to receive numerous awards and has proven to be Leicester Police's most successful campaign. It has now been seen by thousands of school children across the country and millions more across the world online, making sure that people become aware of Kay's story. Story 3. We intend vigorously to pursue an appeal and any other legal remedy that we're able to and are entitled to. We will pursue because we do believe that this was not the right result. We do tell you that Mr. Spector did not kill Lana Clarkson, and we hope that somehow by the time we are done, we will have been able to prove that with this verdict and this sentence, a message has been sent. I think a very clear message has been sent. If you commit crimes in our communities, if you commit violence against our citizens, we under the watchful eye of the district Attorney's office, we will find you. We will prosecute you. And no matter your fame or your wealth or your supposed celebrity, you will stand trial and you will be accountable for your actions. On February 3, 2003, a hysterical 911 call was made from the mansion of famous record producer Phil Spector. Spector's personal chauffeur made that very call. And he would become a star witness in a case and trial that captivated people all over the world. Born in 1939 in New York, Harvey Philip Spector showed creative talent and a passion for music from a very young age. He quickly began forming bands and learning instruments. While he achieved success with his band, the Teddy Bears, his look drastically changed when he decided to move into producing records. He became a millionaire before the age of 21 and by the 1960s he had 23 records in the top 50. It was also in the 1960s that he signed the band the Ronettes to his record label. Onette heard of the talented trio. Ronnie fell in love with Spector and they later married. However, the honeymoon phase soon faded. Spector quickly became controlling and abusive towards her. Metal bars were placed over the windows, barbed wire put around the mansion, and he would take her shoes in a bid to prevent her from running away. Ronnie claimed he frequently threatened her life and often pulled guns on her. In her 1990 memoir, she spoke about the years of torment which culminated in her escaping from the house barefoot with the help of her mother. She said, "I knew that if I didn't leave, I was going to die." Multiple witnesses would say. Although he was a musical genius, he could also become erratic and volatile and frequently drank heavily during recording sessions. The more he drank, the darker things became, and he would often pull guns out and fire them at walls and ceilings. Despite the personal turmoil professionally, Spector's career was still on the up. He was collaborating and working with the likes of the Beatles, the Ramones, the Supremes, and the Rolling Stones. He contributed to and produced a vast amount of hit songs, including Rock and Roll High School, Imagine and You've Lost That Loving Feeling. He also created and coined a new music production technique that people would use for years to come, known as the Wall of Sound. He had well and truly reached the top of his profession and was highly sought after by various A-list artists. However, during the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, Spector took more of a backseat, remaining virtually inactive. Rumors about his wild, bizarre, and troubling personal life began hitting the headlines once more. He was, however, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame during these decades. Phil Spector had been driving around LA going on several dates with different women, visiting his favorite spots. Over several hours, he spent time at the Grill, Trader Vic's, and Dan Tanner's. He had already taken a concoction of pills with a mixture of alcohol, including liquor that was 75% proof. But Spector's night wasn't over. And sometime after midnight, he and one of his dates entered the VIP area of the famous House of Blues on Sunset Boulevard, Los Angeles. Lana Clarkson was an American actress and model. Born in California in 1962, she quickly showed a spark for the entertainment industry. She was talented, beautiful, and had a lot of passion for performing. People that knew her said she also had great comedic timing, regularly working on her own sketches and stand-up ideas. Lana hoped to be cast in different roles that showed her many talents and versatility as an actress. By the 80s, she was achieving success within the industry. Although playing bit parts, these parts were in big movies and TV shows. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Scarface, Three's Company, and the Jeffersons, to name a few. She was also passionate when it came to helping others. She did a lot of charity work and volunteered weekly for Project Angel Food, which delivered food for those in Los Angeles affected by HIV or AIDS. As she approached her 30s, however, her career started to slow down and she wasn't acting as frequently. She decided to start a website as a way of interacting with her fans. On this site, she sold signed copies of her films as a way of making some extra money and giving her fans something more personal. In 2001, she had a serious accident, breaking both her wrists in 26 places, requiring multiple surgeries. This left her physically unable to carry on any film or commercial work for a long time. After this long break, she struggled even more to get the roles she used to, and she began taking part-time jobs to support herself. In early 2003, she took on a new job as a hostess at the House of Blues in West Hollywood, Los Angeles. Many that knew her said this was a clever and strategic decision. As the House of Blues was a popular celebrity hangout, anybody who was anybody would spend time there, and being a hostess, Lana would regularly be making connections with all manner of powerful people within the industry. On February 3, while working in the VIP area, she walked right into one of those powerful people, Phil Spector. Witnesses said that Spector was wearing one of his notorious wigs, and Lana momentarily thought that he was an unknown female trying to get into the exclusive area. At first, she refused him entry, but upon being told he was a famous record producer, she immediately apologized and began showering him with attention and drinks. When Spector's date no longer wanted to participate in the drinking, Spector sent her home. His attention was now firmly on Lana Clarkson. It was very clear to onlookers that Spector was heavily intoxicated by this point and was continuing to drink heavily and spiral further out of control. A few hours later, at around 2:30 a.m., Lana finished her shift and went to go and find her car. She clearly made a good impression on Spector, as after he spotted her in the street, he begged her to come back to his mansion for a drink. The CCTV footage from outside the venue shows Lana getting into Spector's car. Sometime after 3 a.m., Spector's personal driver dropped both Phil and Lana at the back door of the producer's mansion in Alhambra. It was about 40 miles away from the House of Blues, known as the Castle. This secluded 3-acre house boasted 33 rooms and was Spector's pride and joy. The details surrounding how the next series of events came to be will never be fully known. Just before 5 o'clock a.m., Spector's driver, Adriano Duzza, heard a loud popping sound. He got out of the car to check it was nothing to do with the vehicle and was getting back into it when he saw the back door slowly open. Phil Spector emerged holding a gun and said, "I think I've killed someone." Upon looking past Spector into the foyer, Adriano saw the legs of Lana Clarkson and she was slumped in a chair with blood coming from her mouth. Adriano ran down the driveway. He was fearing for his life and knew he needed to call the police. Before he made the call to 911, he left a voicemail on Michelle Bla's answer phone. Michelle was Spector's longtime personal assistant. Adriano briefly told her what had happened, and he would later say that he didn't know the exact address and he initially phoned her to ask her for it. After backing out onto the street and confirming the road name, he phoned 911. 911, what are you reporting? Hi, my name is Adriano. I think my boss killed somebody. Can you send me a do you think your boss killed somebody? Yes, ma'am. Okay. And your boss name? It's Phil Spector. Okay. Phil Spector. At around 10:05, police descended on Spector's sprawling property. When the police spotted him, Spector began to retreat and seemingly started to reach for something in his shirt. Worried he might be attempting to arm himself, they tried to use a taser on Spector, but it got tangled in his clothing and didn't work. They then rushed him with a ballistic shield and knocked him to the floor. Other officers ran past to find Lana. It was evident that nothing could be done to save her, and she was already deceased. Near Lana's body was an open drawer containing an empty gun holster. The holster seemed to match the gun lying next to Lana's legs. Although no fingerprints were found on the gun when it was examined, Lana's blood was discovered around various parts of the mansion. In one of the bathrooms, police found a cloth covered in blood, as well as blood on one of Spector's jackets hanging in a closet, and more blood was on the stairs. In the main living room, police found an empty bottle of tequila and a cocktail glass with some lit candles. Just after 6 a.m., Spector was brought in for questioning on suspicion of murder, and the arresting officers noted that he reeked of alcohol and was clearly inebriated, shouting and slurring at the officers. He denied any wrongdoing and claimed that Lana had taken her own life. He said she even kissed the gun before she pulled the trigger. While in jail, he made a phone call to Robert Shapiro, a defense attorney to the stars. Most notably, Robert Shapiro had been part of O.J. Simpson's defense team in the high-profile 1995 trial. Thanks to Shapiro, Spector's bail was set at $1 million, which he quickly made and swiftly headed back to his multi-million-dollar mansion. Following a similar approach he had taken in the Simpson trial, Shapiro began regularly conversing with the media in a bid to control the situation and present Spector's narrative. In the following months, Spector's PR team also appeared to go into overdrive, and multiple unfavorable stories were coming out about Lana Clarkson. It was alleged that she was depressed at her fledgling career and had just wanted to end it all. A portrait was painted of her as a washed-up B-list movie actress who was struggling to make ends meet. And, shockingly, despite no confirmation of this, it was reported by the Los Angeles radio station that Lana had accidentally shot herself. During these months, Spector also made many various bizarre televised interviews, telling anyone that would listen that Lana had taken her own life on that fateful night. The autopsy results finally came back. They determined that Lana had died when a single bullet severed her spine. On the 22nd of September 2003, despite Spector's claims of suicide, Lana's death was officially ruled as a homicide. And just a few months later, Phil Spector was formally charged with the death of Lana Clarkson. He pled not guilty and maintained that she had taken her own life. It would be 5 years before the case would enter a courtroom. In March 2007, Spector went on trial for the murder of Lana Clarkson. He was charged with second-degree murder, and it was a media frenzy. Judge Larry Paul Fiedler was presiding and allowed the proceedings to be televised. Robert Shapiro was no longer working with Spector, and Leslie Abramson was now in charge. At this point, she was most famous for representing Eric Menendez in the infamous Menendez brothers trial. Lisi and Phil clashed and they parted ways. While looking for another lawyer, Spector decided to take matters into his own hands and created a website with the intent of putting his version of events to the public. His personal assistant, Michelle, helped him film these strange and erratic videos. She recalled feeling at the time that something was deeply disturbed about the way he was approaching the situation. "Did you take Mr. Spector?" "No." "Why?" "Duh. You know, I mean, those are the answers you get." He was tapped off because she pulled the trigger with it and it was a false fingernail and it came off. So half of it fell off on the floor and the other both half split and fell on the floor. Apparently Robert Shapiro said that he had half and the police said they had the other half. Now Robert Shapiro now says I don't have the other half because that's obstruction of justice and he can go to jail for that. So he's denied. And then I fired him. I had been out to dinner and at the grill. I had been to another restaurant, Dantana's, and then I stopped by the House of Blues closing time, and an officer said, Bill Spector could never have done this. He could never stand up and shoot a girl in the mouth with a gun. Where's my history of this? After a while of searching for a new attorney, Bruce Cutler took over. However, he too withdrew due to differences of opinions with Spector. This was just days before the closing arguments. Linda Kenny Benn then stepped in and took over for the final part of the trial. This constant hiring and firing of his legal teams also kept setting the trial back a huge amount. During the trial, Spector's love of guns and his history of abusive and manipulative relationships with people fueled the prosecution's case. Significantly, there's a pattern that emerges in Philip Spector's history, and it's a pattern that's indelibly etched into his history. When there's a woman, alcohol, a loss of control, Philip Spector pulls a gun. By this time, multiple women had spoken out against Spector, and many artists and assistants could attest to his erratic and volatile behavior. One of Spector's sons, Gary, said that at no point did he disbelieve anyone's account of how Spector had behaved in the past. He said it even gave him flashbacks as to what it was like to live with him. The star witness in the trial, Adriano Duzza, testified on the stand and had a lot more to say about the limo ride over to the castle. He claimed that Lana was less keen on going back to Spector's mansion and that Spector kept putting pressure on her to get into the limo. She eventually said she would go back for one drink and then she wanted to leave. This reluctance to go with him in the first place did little to help the defense's case. Spector's defense team painted Lana in a very unflattering light. She was spoken of as someone who seemed desperate to revive an already unsuccessful career and in failing to do so had slumped into depression, culminating in her taking her own life in Spector's home. On September 10, 2007, the jury began their deliberations. After a week, they came back in a deadlock 7-5. They deliberated further, trying to come to a unanimous decision. But on the September 26, the judge declared a mistrial as the jurors were still in a deadlock, this time of 10-2. This was, however, in favor of the prosecution. This ultimately meant that as they hadn't reached a majority, the whole process would have to start all over again with a new trial. It was a devastating blow for Lana's loved ones and the prosecution. Prosecutor Alan Jackson said he wanted a retrial as quickly as possible. He said he owed it to Lana and her family to see that justice was done. After the trial was over, in a shocking twist, Spector asked his assistant Michelle if she would marry him. He worried that she knew too much and said he would feel safer if they were married, as spouses don't have to testify against each other in court. Michelle refused. 13 months later, on October 29, 2008, the retrial began. Judge Larry Fiedler was presiding again. However, this time the trial was not televised. Dorian Wieneberg was now Spector's attorney, and going up against Wieneberg for the prosecution was still Alan Jackson. Weberg argued that the only witness who had been in the vicinity at the time, Adriano Duzza, was continuously giving slightly different versions of the event and how it had played out. Weberg said that this alone should be enough to acquit Spector. Prosecutor Alan Jackson fired back, arguing that Lana had shown absolutely no signs of suicidal behavior, and it just didn't add up, no matter which way one looked at it. The judge again allowed Spector's past history of guns and relationships to be used as evidence during the trial, and witness after witness came forward to attest to these harrowing accounts. The prosecution focused and honed in more on the analysis of the blood, and it was clear that the forensic evidence was overwhelming. The blood splatter analysis shows that there was blood on the back of Lana's hands and wrists. An expert testified that if she was holding the gun herself, this particular position of the blood didn't add up. They said that this indicated that her hands would have been up and near her mouth with her palms facing outwards, not inwards, as if she was holding a gun. They argue that the placement of her hands appeared to be in a more defensive position. Put simply, the blood was on the wrong side of her hands and wrists. The prosecution also said that the blood on Spector's jacket definitively put him within arm's reach of Lana with his arms pointed at her face. Alan Jackson reminded the courtroom of Lana's terrible accident in which she broke both her wrists. Following the path that the bullet entered her mouth, they knew that the gun would have to have been held in a very specific way. Because of the spiral fracture she had from her accident, she couldn't have physically held the gun in the position it would have had to have been in. They also said that in a 10,000 cu-foot house, the chances of Lana, who had never been there before, finding a gun from within a drawer seemed totally far-fetched and ridiculous. This same gun allegedly used to shoot herself had no fingerprints on it at all. If Lana had been holding it, hers should have been there. The prosecution speculated that the way in which Lana's body was found indicated something very significant. Her jacket and shoes were on, and her handbag was across her shoulder. It appeared that she was attempting to leave the property. It was in that moment that Spector felt like he was losing control. And just the same as the other ex-partners described, he reached for the gun in a bid to control the situation. This, along with all of the witness testimonies and the other evidence collected from the scene, showed that the prosecution appeared to have a firmly watertight case. Title of Court and Cause. We the jury in the above entitled action find the defendant Philip Spector guilty of the crime of second-degree murder of Lana Clarkson in violation of Penal Code Section 187A of felony as charged in Count 1 of the indictment. We further find the allegation that in the commission of the above offense said defendant Philip Spector personally used a firearm to wit and handgun within the meaning of Penal Code Section 1222.51 to be true. He is sentenced to the term required by law of 15 years to life on his conviction for second-degree murder. For the enhancement pursuant to 12022.5a, the personal use of a firearm, the court selects the presumptive midterm of 4 years for a total of 19 years to life. On April 13, 2009, the jury found Phil Spector guilty of second-degree murder. On May 29, 2009, he was sentenced to 19 years to life in prison. We intend vigorously to pursue an appeal and any other legal remedy that we're able to and are entitled to. We will pursue because we do believe that this was not the right result. We do tell you that Mr. Spector did not kill Lana Clarkson, and we hope that somehow by the time we are done, we will have been able to prove that with this verdict and this sentence, a message has been sent. I think a very clear message has been sent. If you commit crimes in our communities, if you commit violence against our citizens, we under the watchful eye of the district attorney's office, we will find you. We will prosecute you. And no matter your fame, or your wealth or your supposed celebrity, you will stand trial and you will be accountable for your action. In January 2021, Phil Spector died in a prison hospital from complications relating to COVID-19. He was 81 years old and would have been eligible for parole in 2024. Lana Clarkson's passionate, warm, and loving personality lives on through her friends and family. She was a funny and talented woman who had so much more to give and achieve. Her life was cut tragically short, but the memories people have of her continue to keep her vibrant spirit alive. Story 4. In 1982, I had 3 kids. I had 2 boys and I had a daughter called Dominique. And Dominique was, you know, my only daughter. I worshipped her and she became an actress. There was a restaurant called Mom's Own, a big famous Hollywood restaurant. And the chef there, they had a romance and he stalked her. She became frightened. She never told us he was abusive to her and he killed her. Dominique Ellen Dunn was born on November 23, 1959 in Santa Monica, California. She was the youngest child of Ellen, known to most as Lenny, a ranching eyes, and Dominique, who was a writer, actor, and producer. Her parents were divorced just a few years after Dominique was born, but remained great friends, and Dominique stayed incredibly close to both of them. Her family had a lot of ties to the entertainment industry, and it came as no surprise when Dominique took an interest in performing herself. After graduating and taking time to travel, she began studying acting and booked roles in well-known stage shows, including West Side Story, The Mousetrap, and My 3 Angels. Within weeks of moving to Hollywood, she landed her first big role in the 1979 television film Diary of a Teenage Hitchhiker. She then went on to get supporting roles in various episodes of popular 80s television series such as Fame, Family, and Heart to Heart. She booked a recurring role in the comedy television drama series Breaking Away, and went on to appear in several other television films. Her career was starting to thrive. By 1981, she had quite an extensive acting resume, and this led to her being cast in her first big feature film, the supernatural horror hit Poltergeist, playing Dana Freeling. The film went on to become a sensation and grossed over $70 million at the box office. The role cemented her place in pop culture and she quickly became a well-known face with a lot of acting work being sent her way. After the success of Poltergeist, she was cast as Robin Maxwell in a pilot episode for the TV miniseries V. Tragically, she would never complete filming on the highly anticipated show. Dominic's versatility and capabilities as an actress were apparent very early on. Steven Spielberg was the producer of Poltergeist and worked very closely with her. He said of Dominique, "She was a treasure of natural ability." In 1981, Dominique met a sous chef named John Thomas Sweeney at a private party. 7 years her senior, Sweeney was an established chef and worked at Mamian. Mamian was one of the most exclusive restaurants in Los Angeles, and many a famous face would frequent there. Sweeney's upbringing couldn't have been further from that of Dominique's. His father was an unemployed alcoholic who frequently beat his mother, and his mother worked as a waitress trying to support her family as best she could. When Sweeney was 14, his parents divorced and he set about making plans to move out of Pennsylvania and start a new life. He focused on being a chef and said that this dream was his ticket out of his old life. A matter of weeks after the pair meeting, they moved into a one-bedroom West Hollywood home together. However, the relationship quickly began to deteriorate due to Sweeney's jealous and controlling behavior. He stopped her from seeing friends and frequently tried to get her to quit her flourishing career in a bid to prevent her from meeting new people. The couple rode and fought frequently, and it wasn't long before Sweeney became physically abusive. Dominique appeared in an episode of Hill Street Blues playing a teenage mother who was the victim of parental abuse. The makeup team applied nothing to her face, as shockingly all of the cuts and bruises were real and had been caused by Sweeney in the days before the shoot. Her family, although polite and welcoming towards Sweeney, felt uncomfortable in his presence. They all commented on the fact that it was very obvious that Sweeney was far more obsessed with the relationship than Dominique was. Her mother, Ellen, would later recall the first time she realized her daughter was in grave danger. She said, "She came over here one night and she was weeping. She said, 'Oh, Sweeney has such a terrible temper. He smashes furniture and throws dishes.' And I said, 'Neek, that is frightening.' I've never forgotten her answer. She said, 'Oh, he'd never hurt me.'" According to a source, in August 1982, Sweeney pulled handfuls of her hair out by the roots. Dominique ran to her mother's house trying to escape, and Ellen found her curled up on the floor in the fetal position, cradling her head. Sweeney followed her to the house and started banging on the doors and windows, demanding they let him in. A few days later, however, Dominique returned to the home she shared with Sweeney, and the pair resumed their relationship. During another fight on September 26, 1982, Sweeney grabbed Dominique by the throat and threw her to the floor. He then proceeded to strangle her. A friend who was staying with the couple heard what he described as loud gagging sounds. He ran into the room where he saw Dominique being attacked. Sweeney denied any wrongdoing and told Dominique to come back to bed, seemingly playing it off as one big misunderstanding. Dominique snuck out of the bedroom window and ran to her car. When Sweeney heard her start the engine, he chased her down and jumped on the car bonnet. She turned the engine off until Sweeney got down from the hood. And as soon as He did this, she sped off into the night. She stayed at the home of a friend for the next few days, and her mother stayed with her, too. After this terrifying incident, she phoned Sweeney and ended the relationship. He moved out of the house they shared, and Dominique had the locks changed before she moved back in herself. Tragically, a little over a month later, Dominique Dunn would be dead. On October 30, 1982, just a few weeks after the pair had ended their relationship, Dominique was rehearsing for her latest project V. At her West Hollywood home, she was running lines alongside actor David Packer. Dominique took a break to talk with a friend on the phone when she suddenly realized the phone call had been broken into. Sweeney had got the operator to break into the conversation to listen to her, and Dominique said to her friend, "Oh God, it's Sweeney. Let me get him off the phone." At around 9 p.m., Dominique and David heard a loud banging at the front door. Sweeney had been drinking martinis at the Marmie's own bar and decided to walk to the house. Sweeney refused to leave unless Dominique came out to talk to him. So, she headed out, leaving David Packer inside, and went to speak with Sweeney through the locked door. After a few minutes, she agreed to talk to him on the porch. It wasn't long before an argument between the two began. David Packer recalled hearing smacking sounds followed by 2 screams and then a thudding sound. He phoned the police straight away, but was diverted to the wrong police area. He was told that Dominique's house was outside of that particular department's jurisdiction. Packer then phoned a friend and warned him that if he was found dead, John Sweeney would be his killer. Packer left the home through the back door and headed for the driveway, where he saw Sweeney in some bushes kneeling over Dominique's body. Sweeney told David Packer to call the police. Fortunately, this call did connect properly, and when the police arrived, Sweeney put out his hands in the air and said, "I killed my girlfriend, and I tried to kill myself." Dominique was unconscious and transported to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, where she was instantly placed on life support. She remained in a deep coma, and scans showed that she had no brain activity due to oxygen deprivation. When her father, Dominic, was allowed to see his daughter, he was met with an agonizing sight. Dominique's eyes were wide open, her head had been shaved, and she had a screw in her skull to relieve pressure on her brain. Dominique could see the strangle marks on her neck. Sweeney testified to police that while he remembered arguing with Dominique, he couldn't remember what had happened that led him to attacking her. He said after the verbal argument, all he could recall was being on top of her with his hands around her neck. He said he just exploded and lunged towards her. John Sweeney was immediately arrested and charged with attempted murder. 5 days later, on November 4, her parents made the unbearably painful decision to consent to her being taken off life support, and Dominique was pronounced dead. It was just weeks before she would turn 23 years old. Her mother, Ellen, requested that Dominique's kidneys and heart be donated to transplant centers. Her kidneys were donated to 2 people who were at hospital at the same time as her, and her heart was sent to a hospital in San Francisco. The family all agreed that this is what Dominique would have wanted to help save someone else's life. Dominique's funeral was held 2 days later at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills. The funeral was packed. As well as friends and family, celebrities had turned up to pay their respects, too. She was laid to rest near her Poltergeist co-star Heather Ower, who had lost her life aged just 12 years old, and actress Natalie Wood, who was a good friend of Ellen and one of Dominique's heroes. After Dominique died, Sweeney was charged with first-degree murder, which he pleaded not guilty to. He was also charged with assault with intent to do great bodily harm and was held on a $150,000 bail. Dominique's appearance in the episode of Hill Street Blues aired on November 18, 1982, just 2 weeks after her death. The episode was dedicated to her in the opening credits. Sweeney's trial began in August of 1983 and was presided over by Judge Burton S. Katz. Little did anyone know this would go down in history as one of the most controversial trials. Sweeney took the stand in his own defense. Patrick Torrell, the owner of Marmzone, described Sweeney as a very dependable young man and said he would personally obtain the best legal representation he could for him. However, Sweeney was given a court-appointed attorney named Michael Add, a criminal defense attorney who was notoriously tough. During the trial, Sweeney said that when he had turned up at Dominique's home that day, they had worked things out and were going to start afresh. He claimed that they were planning on moving back in together, and there were even talks of marriage and children. He claimed that on the night of October 30th, Dominique Dunn had abruptly changed her mind about resuming the relationship and that she had been lying to him and leading him on. At that point, Sweeney said he exploded and lunged at her. He still maintained that he had no recollection of attacking her, but stopped when he realized that she was no longer breathing. Sweeney said he had attempted to revive her by making her walk around the driveway, but she soon fell onto the floor. He then claimed he had tried to give her CPR, which caused her to vomit. Sweeney said that he too had vomited and ran inside the house and consumed 2 whole bottles of pills in an attempt to take his own life. The police disputed this and said there was no evidence to suggest this had actually happened. Sweeney said he then went back out to the driveway where Dominique was lying and lay down beside her. He said he had tried to help by pulling her tongue out of her throat, something he said he used to do for his epileptic father. Michael Add said that Sweeney's actions were not premeditated and that he had acted out of a crime of passion, which was provoked by Dominique's alleged lies about a reconciliation. Dominique's family strenuously denied these claims and said that she was well and truly done with their relationship. A letter written by Dominique addressed to Sweeney was read out. It said, "The whole thing has made me realize how scared I am of you, and I don't just mean physically. I'm afraid of the next time you are going to have another mood swing." Deputy Frank D'Elio was the first officer to arrive on scene, and he testified that Sweeney said to him, "Man, I blew it. I killed her. I didn't think I'd choked her that hard, but I don't know. I just kept on choking her. I just lost my temper and blew it again." The medical examiner determined that she had been strangled for at least 3 minutes. Police and prosecutors quickly dismissed their heat of passion defense as they believed that given the fact she was choked for at least 3 minutes, this left a lot of time for Sweeney to regain control of himself and stop what he was doing. But instead, he continued to carry out the vicious and prolonged attack. The prosecution called one of Sweeney's ex-girlfriends, Lillian Pearce, to the stand. At the request of Sweeney's legal team, Lillian did not testify in the jury's presence. Michael had requested that Judge Katz rule her testimony inadmissible as it was in his words prejudicial. Judge Katz granted this request and the jury would never learn of Lillian's statements. Lillian said that she and Sweeney had dated on and off for around 3 years and that he had assaulted her on 10 occasions. She said she had been hospitalized twice for her severe injuries. During one of these attacks, Lillian sustained a perforated eardrum, a collapsed lung, and a broken nose. During her testimony, Sweeney became so angry he jumped up from his seat and ran towards the door leading into the judge's chambers. He had to be subdued by 2 court bailiffs and 4 armed guards. After this outburst, they were forced to handcuff him to his chair. Through tears, he apologized and Judge Katz accepted his words and said, "We know what a strain you are under, Mr. Sweeney," and moved on with the trial. Although Sweeney frequently cried, resulting in the trial being postponed until he was calm again. The Dunn family were told to show no emotion. At the behest of Judge Katz stated, if any member of the Dunn family cries out, rolls his eyes, exclaims in any way, he will be asked to leave the courtroom. As well as Lillian's testimony, Judge Katz refused to allow testimonies from both Dominique's friends and her mother, Ellen. He ruled their statements about Sweeney's abuse as nothing more than hearsay. It was one devastating blow after another for Dominique's friends and family. Michael had requested that Judge Katz rule that the evidence presented was insufficient to prove first-degree murder as there was no proof of predetermination. Judge Katz granted this request and instructed jurors they were only allowed to consider charges of either manslaughter or second-degree murder. Dominique's family were devastated. On September 21, 1983, after an arduous 8 days of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. Sweeney was sat with his hands clasped around a Bible and nodded towards the jury as the verdict was read out. When Judge Katz told the jury they could leave as justice had been served, Dominique's father shouted, "Not for our family." Dominique accused Judge Katz of purposely withholding Lillian's testimony from the jury, which could have helped establish Sweeney's incredibly violent history with women. Media outlets quickly picked up on the outcome, and Judge Katz received immense criticism for his handling of the trial. People felt that his rulings always clearly favored the defense and the victims. Rights group founded by actress Teresa Salina called Victims for Victims marched outside the courtroom in protest. A local Los Angeles TV station did a poll which saw Judge Katz voted fourth worst judge in Los Angeles County. In November, Sweeney was sentenced. He received 6 years in prison, which was the maximum penalty possible for the charge, and he would only serve 3.5 of those years. Dominique spoke at length about the trial and his feelings towards Judge Katz. He said, "Our family has never favored with Judge Katz's charms, not even to the point of simple courtesies. For 7 weeks, he mispronounced Dominique's name, insistently calling her by my name, Dominique. People wandered in and out of the courtroom. Lawyers for other cases chatted with the clerk or used the bailiff's telephone. At the sentencing, in a shock twist, Judge Katz actually criticized the jury's ruling of manslaughter, claiming he didn't agree with it. Katz stated he felt Dominique's death was a case pure and simple of murder, murder with malice. He went on to say, "I am convinced that John Sweeney did not kill Dominique Dunn in the heat of passion, but rather that he killed her because His ego could not stand rejection. The jury's foreman, Paul Spiegel, told the media that he and other jurors were shocked by the criticism from Katz and referred to his comments as a cheap shot. Spiegel felt that the criticism did not stem from the verdict itself, but came off the back of the criticism that Katz himself had received from the media and the public. Spiegel also went on to say that had the jury heard all the evidence and been presented with everything, they would have convicted John Sweeney of the murder of Dominique Dunn. A year after Dominique's murder, her mother, Ellen, founded Justice for Homicide Victims, a victims' rights organization. Her work with this would see her recognized by President George H.W. Bush. Dominique's father also threw himself into work and activism. He started keeping a journal during the trial, and those writings were published in a March 1984 issue of Vanity Fair. It was titled Justice, A Father's Account. At the trial of his daughter's killer. After this, Dominique began covering and reporting on many high-profile cases, such as the Menendez brothers and O.J. Simpson. Dominique said of Sweeney that, "Maybe the law will let him go. I'm not going to let him go." And Dominique stayed true to his word. There was a restaurant called Mom's Own, a big famous Hollywood restaurant, and the chef there, they had a romance, and he stalked her. She became frightened. She never told us he was abusive to her. And he killed her. He killed her. And it was something that just changed the lives of all of us in my family. My wife, my 2 boys, me. Did you know the guy before this happened? Had you met him? Hell yeah. Met him. None of us liked him. And you know, he thought it was because it was a class thing that he was the whatever and he thought we were this. And but that wasn't why. It was there was something creepy about this guy. But women liked him. Did you try talking to him? We didn't know that he was abusive, you see, until it was too late. And how did her death change your career path? Well, it changed everything. Just not my career path. It was just everything in my life changed. I mean, you know, things that had been important to me once weren't important to me anymore. Things that you know, just everything changes. Everything, you know, when you're it's just such a jarring thing to your we all got I was divorced. And my wife and I were closer than we were at the most intimate part of our marriage. After his release from prison in 1987, Sweeney went straight back into working as a chef and was hired by the Chronicle, an upscale restaurant in Santa Monica. This job would not last long, however. Dominique's family started handing out flyers that said, "The food you ate tonight was cooked by the hands that killed Dominique Dunn." As the protests showed no sign of stopping, Sweeney left the Chronicle and fled the Los Angeles area. It wasn't until the mid-90s that the Dunn family would hear Sweeney's name again. Dominique was contacted by a doctor in Florida who had read his article in Vanity Fair. The doctor said that his daughter had gotten engaged to a chef named John Sweeney and wanted to know if it was the same man, which it was. Dominique's brother, Griffin, contacted the woman in an attempt to get her to break off the engagement. After this, Sweeney moved away from the area again, claiming he was being harassed. He changed his name to John Mora. Dominique Dunn admitted to having Sweeney followed and tracked and talked of this freely on an episode of CNN's Larry King Live. He said that the utter injustice of Sweeney's sentence drove him almost crazy. He spoke about a woman who was now in her 80s and who had been a member of the jury during Sweeney's trial. She had written to him expressing how sorry she was and that the verdict was bothering her and she needed to clear it up before she died. Dominique was incredibly touched by her words. After many years, her father said he didn't want to waste his life filled with anger and that he no longer wanted to spend every waking moment keeping tabs on Sweeney. The last that appears to be publicly known about John Mora is that he was residing in San Rafael, California, working as the director of food services for Smith Ranch Homes retirement community. Dominique's family worked tirelessly to keep her name and memory alive and to draw as much attention to their daughter's case as possible. Her brother Griffin still works with the Justice for Homicide Victims Group. Her family's activism and constant fight for justice will never be forgotten. Dominique Dunn was a bright, gifted, and warm-hearted 22-year-old. She was at the beginning of her life and undoubtedly had so much more to give and achieve. Story 5. We're losing a sister this week, too. She was truly a special person. Always had a smile on her face. Justice will be served. It might not be tomorrow, might not be a week from now, but the Creator has work and it'll come out. Faith Danielle Hedgepath was born in Warren County on September 26, 1992. She was a member of the Hilawi-Zapani Native American tribe and was born to parents Connie and Roland. She had 3 siblings, 2 brothers named Caleb and Chad and a sister Rolanda. Her parents divorced when she was a baby and she was raised by her mother and older sister. Faith adored her parents and her father Roland said she was the light of his life. Faith had been born at a difficult time in Roland's life when he had been battling addiction and he said that her being born was the gift from God that gave him a reason to live. She was an honor student and earned herself a Gates Millennium Scholarship to attend the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, majoring in biology. Her father had attended the same university but had dropped out and Faith was hoping to become the first person in her family to graduate from college. Faith had dreams of becoming either a pediatrician or a teacher and was described as lively, bubbly, and always looking to give back to people in any way she could. She found the workload at university initially difficult, falling behind in some of her studies. Undeterred and refusing to give up, however, she started working 2 jobs to support herself, changed her major, and threw herself back into obtaining her degree. She lived off campus in an apartment at Hawthorne at the View. She lived on the 2nd floor, room 1502, and lived with her friend since first year, Karina Rosario. As well as living with Karina, known to most as Rosario or Rosie. Karina's boyfriend, Eric Toy Jones, also lived there for a time. Eric and Karina's relationship was a volatile one, and they eventually broke up and Eric moved out. He attempted to break into the apartment twice despite Karina changing the locks. Faith eventually drove Karina to court to obtain a protective order against Eric. This order prevented him from coming anywhere near the apartment. However, when he moved out, he moved into another apartment on the same complex, so was still living very close to the girls. September 6, 2012 started as any normal day. Faith attended all of her classes and then went to an event for Alpha Pi Omega. Alpha Pi Omega is the nation's largest and oldest Native American sorority, and Faith was hoping to one day join She left the event at 7:15 to continue working on a history paper about her tribe. At 8 p.m., she and roommate Karina went to the campus library for more studying. Faith briefly left the library, leaving Karina there, but returned at 11:30 p.m. and both girls made their way back to the apartment at midnight. About half an hour later, they set off to a nightclub called The Thrill, arriving there at 12:40 a.m. The Thrill was well known for letting in under 21s to dance, and it became a popular student hangout. The girls danced for around an hour and a half before Karina said she felt sick and wanted to leave. She and Faith were picked up on security cameras leaving the club at 2:07 a.m. and Faith drove the pair home. Karina said when they got back, she was sick due to drinking too much alcohol. A neighbor that lived below the girls recalled hearing banging noises just before 3 a.m. She said it sounded like thumping sounds, almost as if a heavy book bag was being dropped or furniture was being overturned. Around 3:30 a.m., records indicate that there was activity on Faith's Facebook account. 10 minutes later at 3:40 p.m. a text message was sent from Faith's phone to the phone of Brandon Edwards, an ex-boyfriend of Karina. Some reports have suggested that Brandon was also romantically involved with Faith at one point, while others claim he was more like a big brother figure. The text message read, 3 minutes later, another text was sent from her phone to Brandon. And this one just said the word van. It is thought that Faith was correcting the word A sent in her previous message, believing the meaning of the original message to be, "Hey B, can you come over here, please? Rosario needs you more. Then, please let her know you care." Brandon replied to the message at 4:16 p.m. the next day, asking who it was that was texting him, but he received no text back. Karina's phone records show that she had also been trying to contact Brandon Edwards at the same time. At 3:52 a.m., another message was sent from Faith's phone. This one was to Ty Michael McNeil, Faith's on-again, off-again boyfriend whom she had known since the first day of college. An extract of the message read, "I know you're probably sleeping, but I just wanted to let you know that I love you." This appeared to be the last activity on Faith's phone. At 4:25 a.m., Karina got picked up by a friend and UNCC soccer player Jordan McCreary, leaving Faith in the apartment alone. Karina said that she left the front door unlocked and believed that Faith was asleep in bed at the time she left. Jordan drove Karina to his apartment about 5 minutes away where she then stayed. The next morning, at 10:30 a.m., Karina phoned Faith, hoping to get a lift home. Faith didn't answer, so Karina called another friend named Marisol Rangel. Marisol picked Karina up and they headed back to Karina and Faith's apartment, arriving there just before 11 a.m. Seeing Faith's car parked out front, they assumed that she had overslept and missed her classes. They entered room 1502 and began calling out Faith's name, to which they got no response. When they headed into the bedroom, they found a truly horrific sight. Faith's partially naked body was discovered on the floor, leaning up against her bed and covered in a duvet. Her t-shirt was pulled up and over her face, and she had no clothes on from the waist down. The blood in the room was widespread, covering the walls, floor, and wardrobe, and a used tampon was found near her body. Faith had been bludgeoned to death, and an autopsy later revealed that she had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Her face was covered in cuts and her body had been badly beaten. There were no signs of a forced entry and unfortunately there was no surveillance footage from around the complex to determine anyone coming in or out. Karina's body was made the call to 911. Okay, listen to me. Okay, listen to me. Okay, how old is how old is she? She's 19. Listen to me. Is she breathing? I don't know. You need to check and see. Is she breathing? I don't think so. Okay, listen to me. There's blood everywhere. I think she fell off the bed because she's like off the bed. There's blood all over the pillows like in the comforter. I just don't know what happened. Touch her arm. Tell me how does she feel? She's not moving. Okay. Ma'am. We need to find out if we can help her or not. Okay, kneel next to her and look in her mouth for food or vomit. There's blood. Tell me something. Listen to me. What is your name? Karina. Listen to me. When you touched her, how did she feel? She feels cold. She feels cold. Okay. Yes. Okay. All right. Don't touch anything else. Okay. Okay. What room is she in? She's in my bedroom. Listen to me. There's something in my room that like was not here before. Okay. Listen to me. It looks like someone had came in here. Okay. Okay. It really does. Okay. Tell me again what your name is. It looks like someone had been in there because she's not like this at all. Okay. Okay. Now, tell me again what your name is. What? What is your name? Karina Rosario. Karina. Okay. Karina, how old are you, Karina? I'm 20. You're 20. Okay. Han. Chapel Hill. Police believed that it was more likely than not that she was raped. A Bacardi rum bottle was collected as evidence. Tissue fragments and DNA were found on the bottle, and it was thought that this could have been the murder weapon. Next to Faith's body was a handwritten note written across a timeout fast food bag. It said, "I'm not stupid, __ jealous." Although the blood covered the walls and the floor, the note on the takeout bag was clean. This suggested that the killer had spent time in the apartment after the murder, washing their hands and cleaning themselves before writing the note. Even if the note was written before the murder, the killer would still have had to spend time cleaning themselves off before placing the note in the room. A handwriting analyst, Peggy Waller, said she felt the note was written with what is referred to as disguise, and whoever wrote it was deliberately attempting to change their handwriting. Chapel Hill's Chief of Police, Chris Blue, said that the murder rate in Chapel Hill equates to less than 1 a year, and Faith's death sparked one of the largest homicide investigations in North Carolina history. After months of very little news, we have new information tonight in the murder of a UNC Chapel Hill student. On one hand, there is new evidence. On the other, a profile of a possible killer. Julia Simpson's here with the latest. Julia. Chapel Hill. Police tonight say they are confident DNA found at the scene will lead them to an arrest. David, Police will not say exactly what DNA evidence was or where it was found at the scene, but they are confident it will lead them to Hedgepest killer. Faith's death sent shockwaves through the community, and fear quickly grew among her fellow students. The university held a vigil honoring Faith with a Native American ceremony. "We're losing a sister this week, too. And it hurts. She was truly a special person. Always had a smile on her face. And you try not to question God's words or His work. But then again, you just want to know why. But justice will be served. It might not be tomorrow. It might not be a week from now, but the Creator has work and it'll come out." Faith's mother, Connie, said that the family were unable to identify Faith's body, and it would be 2 years before they found out about the note left at the crime scene or were able to read the autopsy report. All of the details surrounding Faith's death were sealed by a judge, and they would remain sealed for 2 years despite being against Chapel Hill Police's usual policy. In November 2012, the university student newspaper, the Daily Tar Heel, petitioned the judge who had ordered the investigation records to be sealed. They wanted the judge to release an early search warrant in the case. However, the judge ordered that the records be sealed for another 45 days. At this time, 2 months after Faith had been killed, her cause of death had not yet been released to the public. Connie and Roland Hedgepeth told the media that their daughter's death certificate said that she had been beaten to death. In December 2012, the FBI began assisting the Chapel Hill Police Department in the investigation, and they developed a profile of the killer. This profile stated that the murderer knew Faith and may have possibly lived close to her at one time. The FBI also believed that the killer may have been someone that took an unusual interest in the case, possibly talking to people about it and demonstrating behavioral changes. In May 2013, the court extended the seal of the evidence for a following 60 days. Also in this year, Alpha Pi Omega, the sorority that Faith had dreams of getting into, inducted her as an honorary member. In July 2014, the Chapel Hill Police Department released 300 pages of details about the case after a court ordered them to do so. The public and media were finally able to get some understanding of what had happened to Faith Hedgepeth that night. And 2 months later, the autopsy report was released. It confirmed the same as the death certificate that she had died of blunt force trauma to the head. She was covered in cuts and bruises to her body as well as having blood under her fingernails, showing she fought hard against her killer. According to court records, search warrants were only issued to 2 apartments, and they were both located at Hawthorne at the View. One was Faith and Karina's and one was in a separate building. 2 sources have claimed that the woods behind Faith's apartment weren't searched. And it was noted that the officers didn't search any other apartments on the premises, didn't go door-to-door, and didn't bring sniffer dogs into the area. Another piece of potential evidence came from Faith's phone. On the night she was killed, she had called her friend Una Chavez 3 times, and on one of the calls left a voicemail. Una said that Faith was notorious for accidentally calling people and leaving messages that she didn't mean to. The voicemail appears to be unintelligible. People close to Faith said they heard what sounded either like an argument or a fight between Faith and other people. Others hear what simply sounds like the inside of a nightclub at 1:30 in the morning. Her father, Roland, said he hears his daughter in danger. TV journalist and newspaper columnist Tom Gasparoli started a blog and podcast focused on finding answers for Faith's family. He worked tirelessly to gain more information and share this with the public. He spoke to forensic audio analyst Arlo West and said, Arlo West is the president and CEO of Creative Forensic Services, certified in audio enhancement, and has over 30 years of experience in the audio and film industry. He also specializes in pocket dial phone calls, and believes he heard some notable things on the tape. He believes he heard 4 voices on the tape, 2 male and 2 female. The following transcript is what Arlo West believes could be being said on the voicemail. The timestamp shows the voicemail was left at 1:23 a.m. This meant that Faith and Karina would have been at the Thrill, and from the CCTV evidence, we know they left the club at 2:07 a.m. By all accounts at this time, everything appeared to be okay. This timestamp has been disputed by some people, including Arlo West. He said, I found with the particular brand of phones Faith and Una had both had issues with timestamping and voicemails being sent incorrectly at different times. The towers transmitting the cell phone signals were glitchy at best. I believe, to a high degree of forensic audio certainty, that timestamp is incorrect. Chapel Hill police agreed to look at West's enhanced audio version and evaluate it themselves. However, due to the timestamp of the message, police do not believe it to be a recording of the murder. Police said that the metadata associated with the call reinforces this too. It marks 3 years since a UNC student was found murdered in her apartment. While the case remains unsolved, the family has not lost hope. WNC Spomenik met with the sister of Faith Hedgepath today, who says she's confident the killer will be brought to justice. Boshan Faith Hedgepath would be celebrating her 23rd birthday at the end of this month. Instead, the 19-year-old was killed, found at a gruesome scene, and so far, no one has been charged. You couldn't be sad around her because she wouldn't let you be. She wanted you to be happy and she'd do anything to cheer you up. It will happen. They're not going to get away with it. Hedgepath says police are working but haven't been able to give her family any answers yet. There also is a scholarship in Hedgepath's honor, called the Faith Smile Scholarship. It goes to Native American women entering their freshman year of college. 2015 marked the 3rd year since Faith's death, and her family, friends, and the community seemed no closer to getting any answers. However, a year later in 2016, a sketch of the possible killer was released. Using genetic coding from the DNA at the scene, which acted almost as a blueprint, a company in Virginia were able to predict eye, hair, and skin color, freckling, face morphology, and ancestry of the alleged killer. Each trait comes with a measure of confidence. Using this data, police and the laboratory believe that this could be the face of the killer, although this does not rule out anyone else being involved. According to the image, the suspect, as several people have been looked at quite closely in relation to the case. In the early hours of the morning, when Faith and Karina were picked up on camera leaving the club, they were spotted walking out with a male. Police checked all the footage and saw that the man had arrived at the club earlier with 3 other men. They all later provided DNA samples, of which none were a match to the crime scene. Karina's ex-boyfriend, Eric Toy Jones, was also a heavy focus of the investigation. He reportedly resented Faith for her influence over Karina and felt that she was interfering with their relationship. During a phone call, he allegedly threatened to kill Faith if he could not resume his relationship with Karina. Upon looking at Eric's phone, police found a text that he had sent to a friend. The text was asking them to forgive him for what he was about to do. This message was sent on September 6th, just the day before Faith Hedgepath was killed. Police also found a similarly worded message to another friend via Twitter. 3 days after Faith was murdered, Eric updated his Facebook to say the police seized Eric's Jeep and searched his apartment, but said that nothing came up. Police described him as cooperative and said there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him, and his DNA was ultimately ruled out of the crime scene, Eric told news reporters. However, although he was ruled out as a suspect, police believe that Eric does remain a person of interest, as even though the DNA did not belong to him, he may still know whose DNA was in the apartment and on Faith's body. Faith's father, Roland, has always been vocal about his feelings towards Karina. He said others have expressed their concerns regarding Karina's actions after the murder and about the 911 call she made that morning. People found it strange that not only was Marisol Rangel's name not mentioned, giving the impression that Karina was in the apartment by herself, but also that Faith's name was never uttered in the 8-minute-long phone call. Police said there were things that Karina needed to answer and clear up when it came to the 911 call. Questions as to whether or not Karina was giving the police all the information she knew and whether that information was entirely truthful. A downstairs neighbor walked into Karina and Marisol just minutes after they had found Faith's body. She said of the encounter, "I will never forget that." Marisol was softly crying. Karina was texting. Just texting. People also found it questionable that Karina wanted to leave the club and go home due to feeling unwell to then exit the apartment just hours later, leaving the door unlocked. The man that picked Karina up that morning, Jordan McCreary, had a roommate who had spoken to the investigating team on the 2018 review of the case. The roommate recalled a conversation being had about a potential speck of red on Karina's clothes when she arrived at the apartment that morning. The roommate said that the police were aware of this and searched the apartment for Karina's shirt. The Chapel Hill police confirmed this account. They said they tested the shirt, but this test was not indicative of Karina committing the crime. They also did not confirm whether the red speck was blood or not. Private investigator Hunter Glass has been working closely with Faith's family, and he also feels that more answers lie with Karina. He believes that an argument between the girls ensued at the Thrill nightclub, possibly to do with jealousy over dating or a relationship, which may have led to Faith's death. Karina Rosario moved out of North Carolina and hasn't spoken publicly about the case since. Roland Hedgepath said she no longer takes his calls. Police sources have said that whenever they have made contact with Karina, she has been cooperative. One of Faith's old roommates, Kira, said that Faith was speaking with her high school sweetheart, Alex, at the same time she was dating Ty Michael McNeil and seemed conflicted about the relationships. Kira said that there always seemed to be some sort of drama with Ty and described him as having obsessive behavior when it came to Faith. She said that Faith had told her Ty had once pushed her into a wall. Faith's friend, Una Chavez, who had received the strange voicemail that night, attested to the same controlling behavior and said that Faith had told her that Ty had hit her. Ty was spoken to as part of the 2018 review of the case and said that he had texted Faith on the morning of September 6, the evening before she was killed. He asked her if she wanted to hang out later, but he received no reply. It wasn't until around 3:52 a.m. that he got any answer from her phone. Ty believes that this was Faith texting him, but her father Roland isn't so sure and doesn't think this is how his daughter would normally type. Una agreed and didn't feel it was how Faith would talk either. Just days before Faith was killed, she had spoken to Una about wanting to resume her relationship with her high school sweetheart, Alex, and this just didn't match up with what she had written in the text to Ty. Ty did have an alibi for the night of the murder, and he submitted a DNA sample. However, he said he doesn't know if he was given the all clear by police or if he simply just didn't hear back from them regarding the sample. Decorated Police Sergeant Derek Levisaw and a forensic psychologist Chris Mahandy were part of the team on the 2018 look into the case. They spoke at length about the theories and people that may have had some potential involvement. Chris Mahandy said there's at least 3 or 4 people here that should be considered strong persons of interest. Eric Toy Jones, Karina Rosario, and Ty Michael McNeil. The odd social media posts and the text from Eric, the threats he had already made towards Faith, alongside the fact he lived very close to the women. Derek Levisaw discussed a theory that Eric Toy Jones may have brought someone back to the apartment with him, someone that wasn't as familiar with Faith, and that is potentially who the DNA belongs to. It would have meant that this person may not have been tested yet because they are removed from Faith's social circle. The strange behavior seen from Karina on the morning Faith died and the volatile and, according to friends, abusive and controlling relationship that Faith had with Ty. The pair found it odd and concerning that Ty had downplayed the tension and volatility in the relationship, and they also spoke about the text message sent from Faith's phone at 3:52 a.m. Chris Mahandy described the messages as way out of context for what was happening in the relationship at the time. Something that Roland Hedgepath and Una Chavez both agree with. Although nothing can be said for certain, the pair spoke about the lack of microscopic or trace evidence left outside the apartment. Derek Levisaw said, "You know how you can leave that apartment without leaving a single piece of trace evidence. You're not in a rush." He went on to say, "Who would take the chance at staying in an apartment that wasn't theirs to write a note and stage a scene unless they knew nobody was coming back?" Karina is the only person who would know definitively that no one else was coming to the apartment at 4:30 in the morning. She's the only one. Unless there was somebody else there with her, it's possible. The pair, alongside many others, believe Karina probably knows more than she's saying, but they do go on to discuss the seeming lack of motive. If Karina was involved, why on earth would she commit such a crime against someone who was like a sister to her? Ultimately, investigators do not feel this was a random opportunistic crime committed by a total stranger. They believe it was carried out by someone in Faith's circle and was likely someone she knew through university. Over 2,000 people have been interviewed so far, either as suspects or people with potential information, but nobody has ever been charged. The DNA found at the scene has been compared to hundreds of samples, but sadly none have been a match. Police say this doesn't entirely eliminate anyone, though, as someone may know who the DNA belongs to or may still be involved with Faith's death somehow. Faith's family are offering a $40,000 reward for information that leads to the arrest of the person or persons responsible for Faith's murder. Faith's legacy continues to live on with the Faith Hedgepath Memorial Scholarship. The scholarship is offered to help Native American women enter higher education. When I found out that I was a recipient of Faith Smile Scholarship, I was honored. I was so overjoyed because not having the means to go to school is a big thing in our Native American community. The murder of Faith Hedgepath remains an open and active case. The Chapel Hill Police Department welcome any information that anyone may have. Alternatively, you can leave a tip where all calls are confidential. Story 6. He has already formed an intent to kill as a result of premeditation and deliberation. It's been thought out. He has decided to do it. He's bought a gun for the purpose. He's bought a bus ticket. He's taken the bus. He's come over there. He's loaded the gun prior to the first visit. He's ready to kill. He has considered the reasons for and against it. And having done so, he has decided to kill. November 6, 1967, Dana and Benson Schaefer welcome their daughter Rebecca Lucille into the world. An only child, Rebecca was adored by her parents. Her father Benson was a child psychologist and mother Dana was employed at Portland Community College. Growing up in Oregon, in a religious Jewish family, Rebecca initially thought about becoming a rabbi, combining her faith and her love for other people. She loved the outdoor life, especially horse riding, and this is something her and her father bonded. Even moreover, as she moved into her junior year, Rebecca started modeling and acting in amateur dramatic clubs. Her big smile and striking brown eyes shone through in her photo shoots, and her future career in front of the camera was starting to form. She appeared in adverts for department store catalogs as well as TV commercials. But she soon decided it was time for a change. She spoke to her parents about fulfilling a career as a full-time model, and they agreed. Age just 16, she took a big leap. She moved across the country alone to the city of dreams, New York. With its bright lights, big atmosphere, and social buzz, New York was where many a hopeful performer would go in a bid to further their careers. Although her parents were understandably nervous, Rebecca said to her father, "Do you remember what you said to me, Dad? Sometimes you have to choose between adventure and regret." Although the city was big and overwhelming, 16-year-old Rebecca was more than a match for it. Within the first week of living there, she saw a strange man pacing in the subway with a sharpened screwdriver. A terrified young woman was sat in front of her, and Rebecca hurried over, pretending to know the girl and said, "It's so great to see you. Let's go get a coffee," and pulled her up the stairs. As she settled into her new life in the Big Apple, she began attending the Professional Children's School. The elite Professional Children's School educates children who work in the entertainment industry and boasted stars such as Carrie Fisher and Christopher Walken as part of their prestigious alumni. It wasn't long before her perseverance and hard work paid off. In 1984, she got her first big break. She booked a 6-month recurring role in the ABC soap opera One Life to Live, playing Annie Barnes. After this, she landed a small role in Radio Days, the famous Woody Allen comedy. Sadly, her performance was edited from the film and only a brief scene which features her remains. Despite her early success as a model, she soon found herself coming up against the tough expectations of the fashion industry. She stood at 5 feet 7 inches and many agencies considered her to be too short to model for high fashion. She struggled to find further work, so she decided to leave New York. In 1985, she made another ambitious move. This time to Japan to try and add more to her modeling portfolio. But once again, her height and weight were considered a problem. After this, she decided to return to New York and focus solely on her acting dreams. Undeterred, she started working as a waitress to support herself in between acting jobs and carried on auditioning wherever and whenever she could. She was sharing an apartment with 5 other people, and just as her phone line got cut off as she could no longer pay the bills, she booked a big role. She had recently shot for the popular 17 magazine, which caught the attention of TV producers. They were casting for the comedy My Sister Sam, starring Pam Dober, who had become a household name thanks to the hit show More and Mindy. Rebecca auditioned and won the role of the feisty and funny Patty Russell, a teenager who makes the journey to live with her sister Sam after the death of their parents. Her life changed instantly and she flew to Los Angeles to start filming the CBS show. Her parents couldn't be prouder of her move to Hollywood and were a little more relieved now she was living closer to them, as well as her grandfather, who was living nearby in West Hollywood. The pilot of My Sister Sam aired in October 1986 and had a great time slot in between 2 already very popular shows. She and co-star Pam immediately hit it off, and Pam took 18-year-old Rebecca under her wing, eventually moving her into her house. Rebecca was bright and bubbly and immediately popular with audiences. She became the spokesperson for Thursday's Child, an organization that helps children and teenagers with various issues, including eating disorders, abuse, and suicide. Appearing on various chat shows, magazine covers, and even hosting the Thanksgiving parade for CBS, Pam Dober could see Rebecca's life as a new and young celebrity was rapidly changing. Pam often gave her advice on how to navigate the celebrity world. Pam herself had issues with stalking and obsessive fans in the past and said she and the team told Rebecca in 1987 while shooting My Sister Sam. The security at Warner Brothers Studios phoned Rebecca's team and asked if she knew a man that had come to meet her. 19-year-old Robert John Bardaw had turned up to the set carrying roses and a huge teddy bear and claimed he knew the actress and wanted to see her. Rebecca confirmed she didn't know him and they did not allow him entry. Robert said he was frustrated as he couldn't understand why Rebecca would turn him away. A month later, Robert returned to Warner Brothers, this time extremely agitated and carrying a knife. Security were now aware of who he was and again stopped him from getting in. He was taken into the security office and was told he needed to stop as the obsession he had for the actress was going too far. The head of security was concerned and informed the production company about what had happened. Rebecca continued on with her life and various filming projects. Although My Sister Sam initially was a success with viewers, it was sadly cancelled in 1988, halfway through the second season, leaving many episodes unaired. The show had changed its time slot, and this impacted it massively. Rebecca was disappointed, but continued to throw herself into auditioning. She was then cast in a String of roles including scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills, The End of Innocence, and the television film Out of Time. July 18, 1989, 21-year-old Rebecca was living in a West Hollywood apartment. As well as her career going from strength to strength, her personal life was in a great place. 2. She met 23-year-old TV and film director Brad Silverling on a blind date at UCLA Film School. And Brad said the chemistry was instant. Brad Silverling went on to direct many successful TV shows and films, including Lemony Snicket's, a series of unfortunate events in City of Angels, and the talented young duo had talks of moving in together. On July 18, Rebecca was prepping for a big audition for The Godfather Part 3 and was waiting for the script to be delivered to her door. When she heard the doorbell ring, she quickly answered, but it wasn't the script delivery she was hoping for. Stood in front of her was Robert John Bardaw. It was the same man who had appeared twice at Warner Brothers Studios, and he was clutching a letter and autograph she had once sent to him. Robert John Bardaw was born in January 1970. The youngest of 7 children, he had a troubled childhood. After being abused by a sibling, he was placed in foster care when he spoke about committing suicide and was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. At the age of 15, he was briefly institutionalized to treat emotional problems and dropped out of school shortly after. Robert was only 19 years old and had developed a dangerous obsession with Rebecca Schaefer. Prior to his fixation with her, he was infatuated with the child peace activist Samantha Smith, who was tragically killed in a plane crash in 1985. When she passed away, his attention turned to Rebecca. He started writing numerous letters to her after seeing her on a My Sister Sam. One of his letters she replied to, telling him it was one of the nicest letters she had ever got. What started as him being a fan of the character Patty quickly turned into a fixation with the actress Rebecca. He watched and taped every episode of My Sister Sam and bought every magazine he could find with her in his room. Quickly became almost a shrine to the actress. He traveled by bus to Los Angeles in 1987, hoping to meet her on the set of My Sister Sam. But failing to get past security twice, he returned to Tucson and briefly lost interest with the actress. His obsession shifted towards artists Debbie Gibson, Madonna, and Tiffany Darwish. In 1989, Robert watched Rebecca in the comedy scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills. In one scene, she appeared in bed with a male actor. Robert became so enraged and jealous by the scene, he decided that she needed to be punished for becoming, in his words, another Hollywood __. The teenage Robert wrote a disturbing letter to his sister, saying, if he couldn't have Rebecca, then he wouldn't allow anyone else to. Part of the letter read, I have an obsession with the unattainable, and I have to eliminate something I cannot attain. After trying and failing to get Rebecca's address through her agent, Robert came across an article in People magazine, which gave him a new idea. Arthur Richard Jackson had stalked and stabbed actress Teresa Salina in 1982. And through the article in People magazine, Robert learned that Arthur had used a private investigator to obtain her address. Fortunately, Teresa Saldana survived the frightening attack and went on to found the Victims for Victims organization. She also participated in lobbying for the 1990 anti-stalking law and the 1994 Driver's Privacy Protection Act. Robert decided to use the same method as Arthur Jackson and paid a detective agency $250 to find Rebecca's address using DMV records. His brother helped him get hold of a gun after Robert himself was refused due to being too young and disclosing mental health problems on a form he had to fill out at the gun shop. For a third and final time, Robert traveled to Los Angeles and stayed in the neighborhood where Rebecca lived, showing people pictures of her and asking neighbors if she actually lived there. Once he was certain that her address was correct. On the morning of July 18, he rang her doorbell just after 10 a.m. This encounter clearly unnerved Rebecca. She politely shook his hand and was pleasant to him, but asked him never to come to her home again. Robert was shocked and went to a nearby diner to have some food before returning to her apartment an hour later. He claimed he did this as he had forgotten to give her a cassette tape. According to Robert himself, she answered the door again, but had a cold look on her face. Robert said to a fan, without warning, he pulled out a gun and shot her in the heart at point-blank range. According to Robert, she fell to the floor of her doorway, screaming. Robert Bardaw fled the scene. And shortly after, Rebecca's neighbor, who had heard the shot and the blood-curdling scream, rushed to the doorway. He felt no pulse and phoned 911. She was swiftly taken to Cedar Sinai Medical Center, but there was nothing they could do. And tragically, 21-year-old Rebecca Schaefer was pronounced dead just 30 minutes after arriving. The following day in Tucson, several motorists phoned police to report a man running through traffic on Interstate 10. It was Robert Bardaw. He told officers he was devastated by the death of Rebecca Schaefer and was acting out because of it. An incredibly suspicious thing to say. Police faxed an image of Robert over to the LA detectives who confirmed this was the man they were looking for. After hearing about the murder of Rebecca on the news, Robert's sister told police about the letter he had written to her. He was promptly arrested and extradited to California. He confessed immediately to what he had done. He was charged with first-degree murder, and prosecutor Marcia Clark would take on the trial 2 years later. Marcia became most well known for being part of the prosecution team on the O.J. Simpson trial in 1995, defending Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. In Robert's case, she pushed hard for what is known as a bench trial. This means that the outcome would be decided by a judge rather than a jury. Robert Bardaw agreed to this in exchange for the death penalty being taken off the table. Steve Galindo, a veteran public defender, was in charge of Robert's defense team. Judge Dino Fulonia presided, and he was reported to be one of the top legal experts on psychiatric evidence in the state of California. Despite his confession, Robert still pleaded not guilty. His defense team argued he could not have premeditated the murder due to his mental health issues, something Marshall was keen to disprove. You tell me approximately how many contacts you had with the defendant pertaining to locating Rebecca Schaefer. About 10. During the course of your conversations with Mr. Bardaw over the 10 contacts you indicated you had, was there ever any indication to you that he was violent or posed any menace or threat to yourself or the party he was trying to locate? None. Did you become aware at some point that your brother was interested in the actress starring in My Sister Sam? Yes, I did. And about a month before the murder occurred, did the defendant tell you that he had in fact hired a private detective to find Rebecca Schaefer? I believe he did. Had he ever indicated to you a desire to take the gun to Los Angeles on previous occasions? He gave some indications that I inferred suggested that, so I mean in a roundabout way. Yes, he did. Yes. A man came up to me and stopped me and showed me a picture and asked me if I knew this girl, if I'd seen this girl in the neighborhood. And do you see that man in court today? Yes, I do. Could you please point him out right over there? Do you recall your brother showing you a publicity photo? A black and white publicity photo of an actress? Yes. And do you recall who that was? I didn't know the name at the time, but it was Rebecca Schaefer. Widrig then tells of a letter Bardaws gave her less than 3 weeks before the murder. What did you feel upon reading this letter? I felt that he was upset about something and that he was going to do harm to himself. And the hint at the bottom had dates. Like on a tombstone. Yes, you're referring to the bottom of the letter where it says it's encased in 2 lines. Between the 2 lines it says hint : 1967 to 1989. Yes, but Robert Bardaws was not born in 1967. Rebecca Schaefer was. Widrig remembers the night she found out the real meaning of the letter. I started screaming and it just was hysterical. The defense team called psychiatrist Dr. Dietz to the stand and he claimed that Robert may have schizophrenia and that is what may have led him to commit the crime. By January of '84, Robert Bardaws had become particularly interested in and had observed to be odd by a teacher in a special class he was in for gifted students. That teacher being M.R.S. Morris. He had a tremendous attraction to Mrs. Morris and saw her as a friend, as someone special, as the only one who had been nice to him. He was noted to have been exceeding the usual bounds of student-teacher propriety. He also wrote that when he listens to the radio, he is possessed by it. Over the prosecution's objection, the defense played a song from the rock group U2's Joshua Tree album. Until this point in the trial, the defendant had remained composed in the courtroom, but once the song Exit was played, he sang and strummed to the music. He told me after describing the meaning of those lyrics, that the first effort he made to find, that is to visit Rebecca Schaefer, had been toward the end of May or early June 1987. And he said that he was even thinking of hurting her at that time. Because she sounded arrogant and TV guide, but he wanted to see her before she was a big star. Mart tells of the chilling moment when he approaches Rebecca Schaefer's doorway. Isn't it true that even in a clinical setting a psychiatrist may unwittingly plan a suggestion for a symptom simply by routine admitting procedures such as do you hear voices? Do you have visual hallucinations? Do you see things? That sort of thing. Isn't that true? Yes, it is. You cannot say that when he approached her door the first time that he was operating under a command hallucination. Can you? No. And you cannot say that when he left her door the first time he was operating under a command hallucination. Can you? No. And you cannot say that when he returned the second time he was operating under a command hallucination. Can you? No. And you cannot say that when he shot her he was operating under a command hallucination either. Can you? No, I can't. And I didn't. Marcia Clark hoped to prove that he did in fact plan the killing over several months. It was not a normal 13-year-old, nor with the notion that he was not a normal 19-year-old. A normal person doesn't stalk and murder a celebrity he's never met. Where is the evidence of delusion? That the defendant deluded himself into believing that maybe someday Rebecca might be his friend. Well, then, haven't we all been guilty of being delusional at some point in our lives? Robert was carrying a copy of The Catcher in the Rye when he shot Rebecca, which he threw onto the roof of a building as he ran away. He insisted that it was purely coincidental, even though it emulated Mark David Chapman, who had also been carrying a copy with him when he shot and killed John Lennon. It came out that during the 18 months before he killed Rebecca, he had been arrested 3 times and charged with domestic violence and disorderly conduct. His neighbors also said that he had exhibited unwarranted threatening behavior towards them. Judge Fulgoni agreed with the prosecution. I think it is very clear that this is a killing by lying in wait. I find that Dr. Deed's opinion is flawed. It is biased. I'm not saying that the defendant is a normal person. The defendant is not a normal person. The defendant has some kind of a mental disorder or problem. And I'll even give him the benefit of the doubt and consider him to have some kind or degree of schizophrenia. But the doctor himself admitted that schizophrenics can premeditate, that they can lie and wait, and they can intend to kill. Did he intend to kill? Obviously he intended to kill. But all that gives rise to a naked intent to kill is second-degree murder. What about first-degree murder? Did he premeditate and deliberate? Obviously he premeditated and deliberated. It's my job to make a determination as to how serious this defendant's mental condition is, how it affects him, and, more importantly, how it affected him on the day of the killing. You have a man who's been planning and premeditating to kill someone. He goes to her door and the encounter is pleasant. What he wants now, after thinking about it for a half hour to an hour, is another pleasant encounter. He goes there and the encounter is not pleasant. He has already formed an intent to kill as a result of premeditation and deliberation. It's been thought out. He has decided to do it. He's bought a gun for the purpose. He's bought a bus ticket. He's taken the bus. He's come over there. He's loaded the gun prior to the first visit. He's ready to kill. He has considered the reasons for and against it. And having done so, he has decided to kill. Marcia Clark's hard work paid off. And in October 1991, Robert John Bardaw was found guilty of the murder of Rebecca Schaefer. The time has come to make a decision. I find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder both as premeditated and lying in wait. On December 20, 1991, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A year after the murder, Robert gave an interview in which he said, "I was a fan of hers, and I may have carried it too far, but a lot of things have appeared in the press to make me out to be a monster. If I had one wish, where if it was ever to come true, it would be for Rebecca Schaefer to be alive today." Rebecca was buried in Portland, Oregon, and her service was attended by over 300 people. Her death influenced her boyfriend at the time, Brad Silverling, to write and direct the film Moonlight Mile, about a man's journey with grief after his fiancée is murdered. As a consequence of Robert obtaining Rebecca's address, as well as Arthur Jackson getting Teresa Salinas' details through the use of private detectives, the U.S. Congress passed the Driver's Privacy Protection Act in 1994. This prohibits state departments of motor vehicles from disclosing the home Address of state residence. The case also prompted the 1990 passage of America's first anti-stalking laws. In 2007, Robert Bardaw was stabbed 11 times in the maximum security unit at Mule Creek State Prison in California. He was treated and survived, returning to jail soon after. As of 2020, he is serving his time at the Avenal State Prison in Avenal, California. He frequently draws artwork of famous people, including Rebecca Schaeffer. 21-year-old Rebecca Schaeffer was killed before her life had even properly started. She fought hard for her dreams and the career that she adored so much. The drive she had would have undoubtedly continued to push her forward. Immensely talented and ambitious, she had much more to achieve both personally and professionally. Her tragic and untimely death prompted some big and much-needed changes in the law, and her vibrant and kind-hearted spirit is kept alive by those that knew and loved her. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Night Cared. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware. Even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night, let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.